interdisciplinary practice as much as, say, cultural studies or as much as, say, translation studies. But even for a discipline which mostly operates from the 1980s, say, and more importantly in the 1990s, it's interesting how digital humanities, being such a comparatively younger discipline, has also been able to incite and ignite so many kinds of debates. Some of the debates are situated in the practical problems that exist in the society, whereas some debates are actually futuristic debates, and we'll try and understand what kind of debates there are. To begin with, one of the most important debates which revolve around digital humanities is probably the position of digital humanities. One of the critiques still remains that digital humanities is practiced from a white supremacist position. Does anybody in the class know what is the white supremacist? What is white supremacy? And it's important that we start talking about white supremacist positions while talking about our political consciousness in doing humanities. What is a white supremacist position? Also, can all of you kindly turn your cameras on? I have no clue if you are even there. Please, it's my constant request for all the days. Please turn your cameras on. Ah, I can see Devashish back in class. I actually was asking about Devashish from Pranchi yesterday. It would be lovely to see the other faces too, and I don't understand why you don't turn the cameras on. Do you feel afraid? Do you feel embarrassed, shy? I'm generally a very friendly kind of a person. I will never scold you. Just turn the cameras on so that, okay, somebody's network is bad. I understand. I understand. But please try, those of whose networks are still functioning and relevantly proper, please try to turn the cameras on. Yeah, my next question is, what do you understand by white supremacy? Do you understand what white supremacy is? Because if you do not, then it would be difficult to explain why digital humanities is often seen as a white supremacist practice. White supremacy is generally a belief that the whites mostly up in the global north are still from a colonizer's point of view. They are still talking about a Eurocentric understanding of the world, or they're talking about a North America centric understanding of the world, and therefore they are not taking into consideration the different other kinds of problems that could be faced by people of color or by people of the global south. And digital humanities, because it started off in Europe, particularly along the sides of UK, and also equally in the United States of America. It really does not consider, as much as it tries to talk and explain about its theories, it really does not include different facets of the global south. The way digital humanities was originally envisioned and the way it started its practice did not have a whole lot of, say, Africa in it, did not say have a whole lot of South Asia in it, did not have a whole lot of India in it. There are two aspects to this problem. One aspect is the white supremacist position, in which it was not even considered that digital humanities can be done from the global south. The other problem is the problem which people from the global south, or people from Africa, people from any part of South Asia, India, themselves thought. Now, there are a large part of Indians still think that it is some kind of a luxury to do digital humanities from India. I'm talking specifically about the Indian problems because it will be easier for you all to understand. If we start talking in theoretical abstract terms about a problem that can exist in Africa, it can be understood at a theoretical level, at a provisional level, but it cannot be understood as much as we will really relate to it if we start talking about it from India. Till a long time, this was still a point of contention that digital humanities is some kind of an elitist understanding of doing literature, of doing any other humanities studies, because of this major question of affordability. So anybody has any interaction to that? Anybody has any reaction to that? How many of you in this class think that for a country like India, which really is not a developed country as much as, say, Canada is, as much as, say, United States of America is, or as much as, say, the United Kingdom is, how many of you think it is still a luxury to do something like digital humanities in or from India? And why? Let me just take a quick feedback. Anybody, any comments? Debashish, are you speaking? If you are, then you are on mute.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Uh, I do not think that doing digital humanities from India is bad just because India is a developing or underdeveloped country. Because
Mhm.
we have to match the speed of uh, world's other part.
Mhm.
That is right.
That is a very interesting answer. Well, actually, if you try and talk about digital humanities to me, that's also my position. Even I think that the humanities should be done from around the world because there's no other way of improvising humanities studies. But one of the principal debates which keep arising from the global south is this question of affordability. For a country in which still it's not imperative that every person gets to eat because food is not available to everybody, how much of funding is important, how much of funding to public universities, central universities, or even private universities where fundings are possible, how much of funding should really be granted to research institutes or spaces for doing digital humanities in a country which still lacks in many other kinds of infrastructural development areas. So that is a question which will keep arising. And if people oftentimes still suffer from some kind of a bias in the sense that if you have to grant a lot of research funds, you still do it on, say, medicinal practices, or you still do it on some biotechnological aspects, you still do it on some chemistry related laboratories. People still think that having a lot of fund and grants on some kind of a practice or some kind of a discipline which does not immediately visibly impact people's lives is still luxury. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you do not, you please tell me and I will repeat my sentence again. Do you understand what I'm saying? Many
Ma'am,
people, yeah,
repeat this line.
yeah, I will repeat this line. I'm saying this is a common thought, particularly from India and many other countries down the global south, which are not as advanced or as developed in economies like several other countries up in the global north, where digital humanities is a widely practiced discipline by now. One of these debates is this question of affordability, that for a country in which all people do not have food to eat, a country where all people do not have enough clothes to wear, a country where basic education has still not been given and there's still a possibility of improving areas of basic education, at that level, investing over and granting funds over researches related to digitizing humanities studies probably is still a luxury. This is a common debate which keeps existing. Now, of course, those who are already convinced about digital humanities do not accept it. They will still think, like Devashish correctly pointed out, that we have to, if there is a practice which exists, then we have to make ways for pursuing such practices. And we cannot keep saying that we will wait till that day when every Indian gets food to eat. After that, we will start doing digital humanities. I mean, that's not a political position anybody can take in any research. But the counter argument which often keeps coming is that more grants should be given out to such kinds of studies which can have a visible and immediate impact on the lives of certain community of people upon for whom the research is being conducted. And for digital humanities, that immediate tangibility probably is absent. For many research areas, this immediate tangibility is present. For instance, the world would be more willing to give enough grants and funds for a research on more easily available COVID vaccine, say for example. I mean, it's easy to do those things because you have an immediate visibility, you have an immediate tangibility on issues. But it's more difficult for subjects like digital humanities, which are so cognitive, which are so intangible, which are so cerebral, to even explain to the world the need and importance of such kind of a discipline. Therefore, often it gets posited against a case of affordability. And then people who are championing the cause of digital humanities, such as me, will have to understand that the case of any intangible research should not and need not be posited as a position against immediacy, or as a position against tangibility, or as a position against affordability. It's we who are creating such kind of binary positions of research disciplines in our head. It's we who think that one of the primary parameters of research should be immediacy or should be tangibility or should be some other form of, immediate causality. So therefore, with this kind of research, you have this effect. Probably the case with digital humanities is not so immediate. Probably the case with the digital humanities is more archival, and therefore it tries to approach the world of humanities studies in a different way. So probably it's not as causal as natural science wants us to look at the idea of causality. But that does not in any way harp or hamper the need of digital humanities, because there is no other way in which large chunks of humanities texts can be approached. With day in and day out more number of texts emerging, more number of text readings emerging, it's almost impossible to manually keep working on a certain text anymore. And even if it is possible, it's useless, it's really not needed anymore to understand the thematic analysis of a certain text. That's not what humanities studies should continue being and continue doing. Humanities practices should start approaching the crux of the epistemology of study in itself. Unless we do that, and in order to do that, we of course need the aid of technology, like we want to create tools through digital humanities. Unless we do that, it's really not a probability of doing humanities anymore, because it makes no further sense to pick up one random text and to talk about a text, to talk about its plot, to talk about its thematics anymore. It's neither needed nor is that required. So if one were to actually talk about immediacy, if one were to actually talk about tangibility, the real question, or the more important question than getting funds for digital humanities, would be to talk about the problem of what the earlier, more conservative humanities would do in terms of immediacy, or in terms of touching real human beings. How many lives have we really been able to change by discussing the thematic analysis between William Wordsworth and a John Keats? If we are not asking about those questions in the more conservative kind of humanities, and if such questions are repeatedly being asked only when funds are being requested for in a study of digital humanities, then the real problem may be with the money and not with the philosophical ideation which apparently goes behind the whole thing. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Otherwise, we will again keep talking about it. Pranchi, you were having a difficulty last time. Have you understood this time?
Yes, ma'am. I understand.
Good. The next debate, which is very important for everybody to understand, that there could be a possibility of, because we're constantly using digital tools, there could be a possibility of rendering humanities studies apolitical, in the sense the whole focus will then go on building the tool, and the whole focus will become about computation. Digital humanities includes different facets of study, and computation is absolutely important in such a facet of study. But computation is not digital humanities. The politics of humanities should never fade away, because we are trying to refocus and reorient our understanding also towards computation. In order to turn computation as something important, it's important to understand that digital humanities should not be mistaken with computational humanities. It's not just a case of statistical analysis. The politics should not get lost from the humanities studies. And it will emerge time and again as a specific threat in digital humanities, the apoliticization of humanities learning and humanities practices. Have you understood what I'm saying in this? These are very important debates. Many times people will now think that because we're creating our own digital tools, and therefore creating the tools is part of humanities research, it's digital humanities. As much as just archiving and leaving it at that is not digital humanities, as much as just doing a thematic analysis between a few selected texts is not digital humanities, similarly, just creating a digital tool in order to approach your research problem is also not digital humanities. All of this should be treated as premises to your research. Once these premises have been created, it's important to understand that the politics of humanities studies should not get lost. And I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to mean by the word politics. I'm obviously trying to mean the larger corpus of the word politics. It's important to retain the political flavor in humanities studies. It's important to understand that digital humanities is not trying to neutralize a humanities position. It's important to understand that neutrality is no position, even in the world of computing. Is that clear? Are you all understanding what I'm saying? Just give me a second. Sorry. Yeah, have you understood what I just said? Yes, Nayan? Please give me some comments and feedback. Have you understood?
Yes.
There are other
Ma'am,
important.
can you,
Yeah, Bijumani, please say.
ma'am, can you repeat again?
Oh, yes, I will certainly repeat. The last point, you want me to repeat the last point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is whenever we do a study in humanities research, it's obvious that we take a standpoint from which we try and see texts, try and see cultures, try and see whatever we are reading in our research. And whatever we are reading in our research has to be taken from a certain point of view or a perspective. That itself is political because whatever we are trying to see comes from a class position, a gender position, comes from different other discriminatory positions. That's because we human beings are seeing a situation. We human beings are reading a text and analyzing a scene. Now, when the same analysis is probably being converted on a computation basis, when a computer is starting to, through statistics, through charts, through visualization, through other digital tools, is trying to reach certain answers, since the computer in itself does not have a political position, it's important that the kind of research we posit through the computer does not lose the political aspect of the research. Otherwise it will become a very different kind of a natural science research, probably, in which the real flavor of humanities research will get lost. If I were to ask the simple question, what's the primary difference between a natural science research and a humanities research? I mean, these are questions which were addressed by Karl Popper, the philosopher. Have you all heard of the philosopher Karl Popper? These questions were addressed back during the times of Karl Popper, in the sense when he was asked what is natural science and what is social science. So one of the common answers which still today come into existence is something like this: that natural science talks about something which is universal, which exists independent of people's opinions. How many planets there are in the solar system does not depend on how many we know there are. Whether we know there are 9 planets, there could be 9 planets. Whether we know there are 19 planets, there still could be 19 planets. But the number of planets is independent of what we know about it. They exist. So there is a possibility of reaching some kind of a universal answer with natural science practices. But if I were to ask a question on write a poem on the person who you think has the most beautiful eyes in this class, half of the task is of course about writing the poem. Half of the work is of course about using literary devices of similes and metaphors and explaining beauty in the eyes. But the other half, which exists on deciding who has the best eyes in the class, how would you go about it? How would you say, how would you decide who has the best eyes in the class? It is subjective. You cannot reach a consensus. The whole class cannot say that this person has the best eyes in the class. So it's absolutely subjective. It's subjective from what we understand as beauty, from what we think is attracting our sensibilities, who we find as beautiful. And sometimes we find people beautiful not just by the ways they look. Sometimes we find people beautiful also by the way they talk, by the way they behave, by the way they say certain things and do not say certain things. Whenever a human being is in the position of this analysis, then this subjective analysis carries the baggage of the socio-cultural person who is speaking. If I find someone beautiful, then my idea of beauty has been created by my nurturing, by my conditioning, by my cultural seasoning. But such is not the case with a computer. When we are asking a computer to figure some statistics out of a big or of a large chunk of text, then of course the computer will do it at a very apolitical level because the computer in itself does not have any socio-cultural baggage to carry. Then therefore, if that results in certain kind of apoliticization of a literary text or a humanities text, that is not desired in digital humanities. Because in doing digital humanities, we have to remember we are still very much doing humanities. We are just using digital tools to aid us in the humanities research, which does not mean we are doing computational humanities. We are not just taking statistics out and leaving it at that. Ultimately, we will still put it in our humanities research. So it's important to feed the computer the proper statements, It's important to tell the computer what exactly we want. And after the computer sends us the results back, it's important how we still use it in our humanities training. We are not trying to create some kind of a more universal natural science kind of a law in this. Are you understanding now? Who was the one who wanted to explain? Wanted me to explain again? Is that Bijumani?
Yes, ma'am. I
Have you
understand.
understood now? This is a very
Yeah.
important point which I want all of you to always remember in one of the principal debates of digital humanities. One, of course, is the question of affordability, and if we could still call affordability as a binary opposite of improvement, as a binary opposite of advancement. I still want to believe that affordability and advancement are not necessarily binary opposite categories. And secondly, particularly thanks to COVID, even countries of the global south like India have digitally advanced suddenly by some 5 years. But that's my personal comment. I do not have any citations to talk about it right now. It's my personal comment that had COVID not happened, the digitization of studies in India would have at least taken 5 more years to happen at a more structural, universal level across India. And COVID has somehow, with all its negativities, with all deaths and diseases, somehow this one good thing which COVID has done is, even for other countries of the global south, it has suddenly boosted the format of learning online, the format of using digital tools in understanding and practicing. Do you agree with this? There's no citation here, but just do you, in a general discussion, do you agree that COVID has somehow helped and boosted the studying and academic practices in an online mode?
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, it would
Yeah.
take at least 5 more years to reach that stage in India.
Yes, ma'am. I agree.
Even it's my personal comment. Do not put it on your answer scripts or anything, because I do not have any academic citation for this. This is something I believe and I want to share informally with the class. The next debate, which of course I have to mention to all of you, is the problem of encouraging big cartels and big monopolies to carry on with their monopolistic practices in our attempt to turn digital. I will give you an example. How far often do you realize in any seminar which happens in your university, say you send out a call for paper where you want people to submit their abstracts? This is a very common practice all of us do. Yes or no? Please keep agreeing or disagreeing.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. In
Yes, ma'am.
that, so many times I have seen people writing, please send in your abstracts in not more than 300 words, 500 words, whatever, mention keywords. Send them in Microsoft Word, Times New Roman, font size 11, 12, double spaced, etc. Have you all seen such kind of call for proposals?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Along with standardizing writing, why is this Microsoft Word, Times New Roman, font size 12 even wanted? Because we want all kinds of writing to come in one standardized format. Because of our obsession with standardization, I think we constantly keep doing this unethical practice of endorsing a monopolistic company such as Microsoft. And this will keep happening more and more. We try and do digital humanities, we are inadvertently, unless we create our own tools, if we are using already existing tools, then we're only trying and helping the big monopolistic structures. In fact, I always tell my students never to write like this, that submit your article in Microsoft Word. We are nobody to say whether you're going to submit it in Microsoft Word or in Open Office or what. We have so much so even forgotten how to use the generic words. We should have really said that type it out in any word processor in a font size which resembles 11 or 12. Instead, we keep mentioning Microsoft Word, we keep mentioning Times New Roman, which is a flagship font of Microsoft Word, and we're actually trying and enabling certain monopolistic practices. We're adding to the cartel. Do you understand the meaning of the word cartel? Yeah, we are only adding to the possibility of existing cartels to grow bigger. Therefore, one problem with digital humanities might be the constant upsurge of monopolistic practices through a certain procedure of corporatization. So what is the alternative here? You obviously have to create your own digital tools. Unless you create your own digital tools and unless you put it up in open source so that others can also use it, without having to buy it or without having to get a licensed copy, we can never achieve digital humanities practices. And the kind of practices that involves in corporatization through the carteling of digital tools is certainly not one of the ulterior motives of humanities studies, even if we are doing it digitally. Have you understood this point? Otherwise, I will again repeat. Please tell me if you've understood. Yes? Have you understood?
Ma'am, can you repeat the last part? Two
Yeah,
or three sentences, I guess.
I am saying, as digital humanities practitioners, unless you start creating your own tools, if you constantly keep using existing tools, then who are the ones who are ultimate gainers in this process? You are thinking that your immediate work is done. Actually, what's happening, because we have not learned the art of creating our own tools, we are already using existing tools. These existing tools would exist from different companies, but for anything that exists in large sums, ultimately there's going to be some monopolistic company who's going to take away the entire monopoly of the tool. If it's a search engine optimization tool, some cartel would take it up. If it's a word processor, some cartel would take it up. And we, in our attempt to turn digital, should be very careful about this aspect. We cannot keep talking in branded terms and say that submit your article in say Microsoft Word. We cannot go around saying that by tomorrow do send me a PDF, and I cannot open this PDF because I don't have Adobe Reader. These are problems we keep doing amongst ourselves because we think that Adobe is this company which needs to be approached in order to open our PDF. Because we think that Microsoft Office is the only thing which is available with all of us. So as a process of digitizing our procedures, as a process of digitizing our practices, what we are internally doing is we are corporatizing and creating cartels of big monopolies, which is not necessary and which is actually to be avoided once we are doing digital humanities, because it should be up on the open source. The whole philosophy is for everybody to be able to access it. The whole philosophy is so that it does not remain, so that access to education and networked relationship of learning is not limited to a structured few. Because if it is, then why do we otherwise have a problem with white supremacy? One of the problems we have with white supremacy is because of the exclusivity, because we want it to turn universal in nature, because we want everybody to be part of this revolutionary process. And I don't know if the process is entirely revolutionary or not, but at least in our dreams it is. There are different other problems also which are far from being revolutionary. But we have to keep in mind that one, in order to use digital tools, we're not turning our humanities practices into a political. And we also have to keep in mind that we're not corporatizing our humanities practices by using existing tools and adding to certain monopolies and cartels. As a result, we have to select our area of research very carefully. We have to understand that the feed-in to the computer is done from a certain, not from just random aggregate positions, but a carefully crafted position where the positional baggage does not get lost. Therefore, the politics remains, the politics is intact. And we also have to understand that we have to create these tools by ourselves. Otherwise, we will constantly suffer from this flow of encouraging big cartels instead of making the market open through open source. We want knowledge for all. We want learning for all. We just don't want a significant few with access to certain kinds of apps and tools to be in the grasp of things. We want knowledge to reach from across the world, across different other kinds of discriminations. Have you all understood? Then concurrently, as we move ahead from this particular point, we will come across the positions of copyright, and therefore we will also have to talk about how copyright in itself can be a problem in digital learning. Because finally, after all, from the web and from the internet, if you have to buy this and if you have to get access to that, otherwise you will not do this. If you're from this university, you can read this. If you're not from that university, you cannot read this. These are all different kinds of discriminations. And sometimes discriminations are done in a very noble way, such as meritocracy. Do you understand what the meritocracy system of discrimination is? You tell people that only the meritorious people will study in a university, only the meritorious people will have access to our library. So that's also a kind of discrimination. because you pre-decide on who's meritorious, and therefore those people will study certain kinds of texts. And those who are not meritorious as on date, you keep imagining that such people will remain non-meritorious, if, and therefore they will not be given access to different kinds of public libraries, say. So different universities across the world, and this project has also been done in India, significantly done in India. We need to have open source digital libraries. The MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, for instance, has their entire open courseware. Whatever they teach in the class, they also have it up on the web in open source. So basically, if you're interested, you can learn anything that people in MIT learn. Only difference being you probably won't end up having that degree. But for the joy of learning, nobody's stopping you. The IIT Kharagpur from India has done a marvelous project called the National Library, for the National Digital Library, NPDEL. Do you all access the National Digital Library in India? I'll give you the link in your chat here. Wait.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. The NPTEL is a fantastic project which has been done by the IIT Kharagpur. In case anybody is still not accessing that, you have different kinds of courses over here, you have different kinds of materials, you have different kinds of learning structures, and all of these are teacher agnostic. I'm sure all of you already know about this website. Do you? I think only Devashish said yes. Who's interested? Has anybody before this class known or accessed the MIT courseware? Yes? Have you ever accessed the MIT OpenCourseware?
No, ma'am.
Please go through the MIT OpenCourseware. It's a fantastic place. As much as NPTEL is a fantastic place, this is also a fantastic place. So increasingly one has to realize, one has to understand that knowledge is for all, learning is for all. And that can happen only if all the content has been aggregated and uploaded on the websites of certain open source spaces. Where philosophically one ends up believing that knowledge should not be limited and knowledge cannot be limited. It has to be shared across different places. And historically there of course is this license called the Copyleft. Have you all heard about Copyleft? Initially, it was posited as a license against copyright, but we have still historically moved away from copyleft also. Currently, the open source license which we use is called Creative Commons. The most common example of Creative Commons implementation is the Wikimedia. Any project under the Wikimedia, such as the Wikipedia, is uploaded up on the web on Creative Commons license. Creative Commons has different other kinds of sub-licenses. And the most common thing which educationalists should be using is the one called Creative Commons, non-commercial, no derivative license. So basically you can reproduce any work for the sake of research. You have to acknowledge whoever has originally written it. In Wikipedia, you cannot acknowledge the name of the author, but you can acknowledge the URL and the date and time of access. And you have to keep the licensing line verbatim and intact. You cannot modify the license line. However, you can modify the content that is inside the Wikipedia page, and there will be a team of moderators who will often check. If it is generally not going against community standards, they'll keep it. Unless you're promoting some kind of hate speech through Wikipedia pages, generally it will not get removed. However, the verbatim license has to be kept intact. The license which I use and the license which Devashish uses cannot be different. The license has to be verbatim, intact, and same. So that's about Creative Commons, which is a very important license. But the debate revolving this license is far-reaching. The debate is, if everything's now up on the open source, how will artists earn money? How will a novelist write a novel and then earn money? How will a singer release or publish his or her album and then earn money up in the open source? What is your take on it? Please note these points down, because probably on the last 2 days when we have presentations in groups, one group can actually address this. That with the advent of open source, this is a very common debate which exists around the world. With the advent of open source, what happens to the royalty, what happens to the money which otherwise legitimately an artist was supposed to earn through sale of books? But now we will download it from somewhere. For YouTube and spaces like that, we will hear the music for free. So what will happen to artists? Has this question ever come across your minds before this? This is a very common question which keeps arising.
Yes, ma'am. In the previous lecture series, we have talked about copyleft, I guess. But
Yeah. So I'm
this
not talking
point
about
is
copy more, yeah.
yes. But this is the point where I thought about that, but not a specific answer come out.
Yeah. So anybody has any comments? See, this debate arises because we keep confusing the position of a writing from the position of the author to the position of the reader. We're constantly, when we are thinking along these lines, we're constantly thinking that the reader is free to do anything. If the reader wants to share, the reader can share by just keeping the verbatim license intact. That is not the case. For any content to exist in open source, the original creator must consensually put it up on open source. If it's a copyrighted material, we still cannot copy it. We still cannot reproduce it. So the point is not to create aware readers, because readers will always be aware. Readers will be aware, readers will want to access it for free, viewers will want to access it for free and pass it off in the name of awareness. The real debate is to create as many producers who will believe in the idea of uploading their content on open source. It could be a piece of writing, it could be a piece of music, it could be whatever. The point is to create as many kinds of aware creators who will put their work up on open source. For instance, many of us write on Wikipedia. Are there many people in this class who write on Wikipedia? Those of you who write on Wikipedia, do you ever keep getting scared that your writing will get modified or that your writing might get deleted? Because you are already agreeing to write in a platform which is up on open source, which is on Creative Commons. The point is to create as many such creators who can create content and upload them in some kind of an open source. Otherwise, there's no point. Otherwise, this is not a game of a police and a thief. This is not a bad cop, good cop game, and this is not a game where somebody will be seen as a thief, because this is not a case of theft. And this discussion we had previously, one day after class also we had this discussion. This is not a case of theft that somebody has to be very careful about catching the thief. We have to create more number of aware creators who will create and upload their content on open source. By the way, do you have Wikipedia in the Assamese language?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Recently, it has completed 10,000 articles.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So immediately when you're thinking of doing many projects, some of you or maybe some group can also think of creating an entire wiki page in Assamese. I wouldn't know the Assamese language. Maybe I will request Professor Dr. Nyuk to check about the Assamese language bit. And Partha sir will look after the technicalities, and I could probably look after the format. And together, maybe of the different group activities which will end up having assignments in the last 2 days, at least one group can think of learning how to create from beginning till the end one entire wiki page in Assamese. It could be a small project, but a relevant project, and it will stay forever. I mean, people can modify the content, but the point will remain forever. The learning will remain forever. Good. The other point, of course, which is one of the last points of the different kinds of debates that we have, and this point will go on and on and on, is this question of piracy. Digital humanities will often get mistakenly understood along with artificial intelligence and with piracy. It's important to begin with to understand that digital humanities in itself has got nothing to do with either artificial intelligence, or in itself it has nothing to do with piracy. We are not advocating the cause of piracy as much as we are not opposing the cause of piracy, because we are a discipline which is working towards aiding research in humanities by using our own digital tools. But for people across the world, these two attacks will constantly keep coming back to us. One question is about this question of intelligence, that how much the computer would be able to give back to us. And in doing so, because of all media cultural representations, we keep thinking that one day the robot will grow bigger than us. One day our computer will overpower us. And that will be some moment of a digital apocalypse. all that is beyond the scope of understanding of digital humanities. AI is not something we are going to catch over here. Unless you want to specifically make a digital humanities project, unless you want to create a robot that will write an entire epic, unless you want to create a robot that will write poems. Okay, just give me 2 minutes time. I will share a very interesting link. Have you all heard of this word, which I just mentioned in the chat? Has anybody heard about this? If you have heard, then what is it? Has anybody heard about IDA?
No, ma'am.
IDA is an artificially intelligent robot which can create an entire sculpture on its own, which can create a painting on its own, which can write its own poems. It can do different kinds of creative activities on its own. There are many examples of such robots which are creative in nature because they have been enabled to become artificially intelligent. Unless we're creating robots, unless we're creating artificial intelligence to aid us in digital humanities, artificial intelligence in itself has got nothing to do with digital humanities. As a concept, the two are different, which can be put together if one is interested. And same is the question of piracy. We're not really saying that piracy is the only thing that should be done. That's not the point. But we're championing the cause of open source and saying that it is important that people around the world get access to education. People around the world get access to content. People around the world get access to everything that legitimately should belong in a network of relationships, which has to exist beyond the binaries of the high and the low, of the white and the black, and every other kind of discriminations that can exist. So I have been talking about ensuring that that digital humanities as a practice does not end up being white supremacist or any other form of supremacist positions, particularly because we as practitioners from India should take special note about contextualizing digital humanities within our ambit of academic pursuits. It's important that we figure out the global presence of digital humanities. And when I mean global, I do not want you to take examples from one UK and one USA and India. For a global presence, it's important to locate as many examples from the global south about digital humanities as possible. Otherwise, so that the question which starts from global possibility will end up being in global presence. I spoke to you as the third point about digital tools the tendency of digital tools to turn your study into being apolitical. Please make sure that because you're using digital tools and you're using statistics, that is only a premise of how the research will land up. That's not the entire end to the result, because in doing so, let's remember that digital humanities should never end up turning our research apolitical. The political position in every humanities research ought to remain like it always remained. That's the third point. My fourth point, as far as the debates is concerned, is about being very careful so as not to corporatize and make bigger cartels out of monopolistic tools. This is possible if you create your own tools, because then you will not end up to the existing market economy of the monopolistic tools that exist, such as say Adobe, such as say Microsoft. I'm taking names openly because I don't know, I keep championing this cause so openly these days that I keep talking about it like that. I spoke to you about copyright as having been rendered obsolete by digital humanities practitioners and their tendency to move towards copyleft. And even after copyleft, with or without copyleft, these days it's important we all move towards the understanding of Creative Commons, particularly for academicians, the Creative Commons, non-commercial, no derivative license. It's important for us to understand that the artists who are supposed to get money, it's not as if digital humanities practitioners are against them. It's not as if we are trying to say that every artist should die out of hunger because they will not get their royalty and we will take all content from the internet in undue ways. But what we're trying to say is to create a generation of aware creators who willingly will upload their content up on open source. That can solve the problem of discrimination in learning. And of course, digital humanities per se is neither artificial intelligence nor a case of championing piracy. It can come in roundabout ways. We can have AI positions which will aid in the study of digital humanities, or we can talk about open source course materials such as the MIT courseware, such as the NPTEL courseware, from which we can access academic content or written content, audiovisual content as a principal philosophy, not because we want to derive somebody out of their money. We want to take somebody out of their legal rights of money. We want to rewrite somebody. So yes, any questions, comments, interactions? Is Partha sir present? Is Dr. Neok present? Any of the teachers present? Yes, Debashish, are any of the teachers present who could initiate the question answer session? Partha sir or Dr. Neog or anybody?
No, ma'am, they are not present.
Okay. So, okay, I will conduct the question answer session. Any of you have any questions, comments? There is somebody called the SMS department. Is that any of the professors, or that's just a random login?
Me actually.
Oh, that's you. Okay. So yeah, anybody has any questions, comments? So tomorrow our class is from 12 to 1. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, next 2 days, the class is from 12 to 1. I hope all of you know that already.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good, good. Yeah. Any other questions? Are you all understanding what I'm saying? Is it very new to your ambit? Are you finding it too difficult to grasp?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. For the others, last 2 days we will have assignment and we will have presentations. So if you are 19 people, let's just call it 20. 20, if we divide it into a group of 5, then we can have 4 groups. Because 4 5s are 20. We will have 2 presentations on one day and 2 presentations on the other day. Each presentation can last for 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute interaction. I'm mentioning this to you now. I will also mention this to Partha sir. So I will ask Partha sir to create 4 groups for me, consisting of 5 people each. Those 5 people for that day necessarily will turn your cameras on. You can create a presentation which is audiovisual in nature, or you can just talk about any digital humanities issue. 20 minutes this group will talk, maybe one person from the group will talk, or all 5 will talk, whatever, based on how you want to design it, followed by a 10-minute interaction in which I can ask questions or others in the class can ask questions also. So 30 minutes, 2 groups, 30, 60 minutes, therefore 1 hour. Next day again, 2 groups, 30 minutes similarly. And we finish off with the assignments till unit 2. Is that clear with everybody? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. In which language we have to speak?
Oh, I don't
presentation?
understand Assamese, beta. I don't understand Assamese at all. So probably you'll have to speak in English. I know it could be a problem with many, but so let me talk to Partha sir, and if Partha sir understands Assamese.
Yes, ma'am. He is from Assam.
Let me talk to him. But if Partha sir
Yes,
understands, I will understand almost nothing.
in your case, most of our students are comfortable in Hindi, I guess.
I understand Hindi.
And
I understand
many
Hindi.
of them are in English.
Yeah, I understand Hindi completely. So maybe you can speak either in English or Hindi. I understand Hindi. Just that if you speak Assamese very slow, I might get some meaning, but still I won't be able to understand the whole thing. But if you speak in Hindi, I'll understand. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So as far as which 2 groups will speak on 23rd and which 2 groups will speak on 24th, that I will take help from Partha sir, because I don't know all of you. 5 people in one group. So group 1 and group 2 will speak on 23rd, and group 3 and group 4 will speak on 24th. The time of presentation would be 20 minutes followed by a 10-minute interaction. And again, for the next group, it would be 20 minutes followed by a 10-minute interaction. Okay? Okay, then. If you have no other questions, thank you. See you again tomorrow, 12 o'clock. And your presentation would be on any issue of digital humanities that you want to talk about. There's no limit to it.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. See
Thank you,
all
ma'am.
of you at 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.